Hello, welcome to Nixon's the One. This episode deals with his conflicted candidacy in 1962 for governor of California. Today's July the 16th, 2025. I'm Merrick Masters, a professor of business emeritus, commentator, and podcaster. You can find me at my YouTube channel and email address. Nixon's candidacy for governor of California in 1962 was conflicted because it was unclear in the minds of many voters whether he was running for president more than he was actually running for governor of California. Nixon fueled this doubt about whether he was running for president or governor in his announcement that he made on September the 27th, 1961 in California, in which he said, "First, I shall not be a candidate for president of the United States in 1964. Then he said, I shall be a candidate for governor of the state in California in 1962. He immediately focused the people's attention on which he was actually running for. Nixon had received competing advice shortly before he announced his candidacy in July 1961 in a letter to former President Eisenhower. He said that he was leaning strongly against running. Eisenhower met with him after that in Gettysburg, and in August of that same year wrote Nixon saying that he urged him to run. Hubert Hoover and Douglas MacArthur, on the other hand, urged Nixon to run for Congress. Nixon's family was divided on the matter. His wife, Pat Nixon, did not think he should make the run for governor at that time. Nixon, despite being the former vice president and presidential nominee in 1960, having lost to John F. Kennedy by a hairline in a very tough campaign, did not have an easy time gaining the Republican nomination in the June 1962 primary. He faced an aggressive campaigner in Joseph Schell, who was a California State Assembly representative representing the conservative wing of the party. He was also a former football star for the University of Southern California. In the Republican primary in June of 1962, Nixon garnered less than 2/3 of the vote. Schell actually got more than 1/3 of the vote, suggesting that Nixon's had weaknesses in his base in the Republican Party, the conservative element of that base in particular, and that may be a problem as he tried to get enough votes to surmount the Democrats' lead in voter registration in California. In the campaign in March of 1962, Nixon renounced the hard right as represented by the John Birch Society and its founder, Robert Welch. Welch was an avid anti-communist who had made attacks on former President Eisenhower, accusing him in effect of being a communist. Nixon believed that anybody who made such attacks should be renounced, and his organization, to which he demanded fealty, namely the John Birch Society, should be renounced as well. Nixon ran an aggressive campaign, traveling extensively, giving a variety of different types of presentations, shaking hands, and getting his message out through a plethora of policy statements. Nixon tried to get the incumbent governor, Pat Brown, who was elected initially in 1958, to debate him. He was unsuccessful in getting a full-fledged debate to occur, although there was a joint press conference appearance between Nixon and Brown in early October, which probably didn't do either candidate very much good. Here's a little bit of information on Nixon's efforts to prompt a full-fledged debate between the two candidates. Nixon had planned his campaign to build and gain momentum during the weeks leading up to the election. Toward that end, in the latter part of September, he released a private poll conducted by his campaign that showed him with a slight lead over Governor Brown, 40.8% to 39.5%, with nearly 20% of the voters undecided. Nixon's effort to continue to gain momentum was interrupted by the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was announced to the nation on October the 22nd, 1962, in a televised speech by then President Kennedy. The nation was gripped for the next 13 days in the scandal as the United States tried to get the Soviet Union to remove the offensive weapons that they had deployed in Cuba. Here is a statement from Richard Nixon issued shortly after Kennedy's speech that indicated he supported Kennedy's initiatives in this regard. Regardless of Nixon's support for Kennedy in this particular crisis, the wind was taken out of the sails of his campaign. Nonetheless, he pursued it aggressively, conducting a number of different telethons and still campaigning aggressively across the state. He was defeated on November the 6th, 1962, in the election by nearly 300,000 votes by Pat Brown. It was a very demoralizing defeat for Nixon as a person and his family. Nixon, the day after, held a conference at the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel in California, in which he made his famous statement that, "Just think how much you're going to be missing. You won't have Nixon to kick around anymore because, gentlemen, this is my last press conference." Public opinion was sharply divided on Nixon's defeat and its political implications for him, and also on the last press conference, which many believe was really a nail in Nixon's coffin, so to speak. There was a documentary that aired on November the 11th, 1962, entitled "The Political Obituary of Richard Nixon," and that really said it all about what it thought about Nixon's future in politics. There was criticism of that, as indicated in this brief editorial by Time magazine published on November 23rd, and there is no doubt that the airing of this documentary generated a lot of sympathy for Nixon, which really ironically propelled him on a campaign to recovery. Nixon is the one who got poetic justice, however. He campaigned assiduously for Republicans throughout the 1960s and set himself up to run for president in 1968. He won the presidency in the election on November 5th, 1968, and former Governor Brown, whom he had lost to in 1962, but who had lost to Ronald Reagan in 1966 for governor of California, sent him a congratulatory note on November the 7th, 1968, in which he said, "I can only tell you that I have deep admiration for the significant comeback that you have made." Here's a little bit about myself. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Stay tuned for more from Nixon's the One. Thank you and have a good day.